Thank you, Patrick. So as Patrick mentioned, I'm Mike Boland, and I'm an analyst with BI Kelsey. So welcome, everyone, to Local Search for National Brands, the Tactical View. As that title implies, our goal is really to examine the opportunities for large national entities to localize their search campaigns. And this is all really happening at a time when smartphone penetration is driving lots of local commerce, and most of that taking place offline, as we'll go over. So what are some of those opportunities, and what are the concrete ways they're being realized? Excuse me. So to help me do that, I'd like to introduce my co-presenters. We have Matt Mullenberg, who is Senior VP of Offline Product Solutions and Strategy at Marchex. Matt, how are you today?
Great, Mike. Hey, folks, thank you. And Mike, thanks for involving us today. We're really excited about it.
Absolutely. And we also have Adarsh Nair, who is Senior Director of Product and Engineering at Marchex. Adarsh, how are you?
Good to be here, Mike.
Great. And we'll look forward to hearing more from both of you guys in just a bit. So first, to give you all a sense of what you can expect out of the next 45 minutes or so, the goal is really to have concrete rhetoric about this local search opportunity for national brands, but particularly how it's driving lots of offline conversions. And one growing element in influencing that particular path to purchase is phone calls. And usually phone calls from mobile devices, which is an area where Marchex has lots of expertise, and BI Kelsey has lots of data and insights that we're going to share today, including some brand new data that hasn't even been shown to anyone yet. So I will kick things off with BI Kelsey analytical views to set the stage, and then we'll hear from both Matt and Adarsh about how all of this is playing out in real life, and then we'll have an open discussion and take some of your questions. So before we get into all of that, to establish some context and credibility, I'd like to give a few quick words about BI Kelsey. So for those unfamiliar, we are an independent market research and analyst firm that focuses on media and advertising, and we put together insights and analysis, and that takes form in lots of different ways, including research reports and market forecasts and consulting and conferences and webcasts like this. So this slide spells out a lot of the ways that happens. And what you can also see here is a screenshot of a white paper I did last year on call monetization and call analytics. And I'm currently actually working on a refresh of that analysis, some of which we're going to see today. So likewise, for the sake of context, Matt, why don't you tell us a bit about Marchex before we continue on?
You bet. Marchex is a mobile analytics platform. We have really focused our investments over the past couple of years in the connection point between online behaviors and the offline activities that result. Said another way, we're giving advertisers an opportunity to move away from weighted site outcomes as a proxy for success and move to the measurement of actual transactions or actual consumer behavior to inform how they're doing media campaigns and media buying. We provide technology that allows you to attribute and optimize 100% of your digital spend back to the channels based on those real-world outcomes. And we're providing really advanced and unique advanced solutions for search, display, email, and other forms of performance-based media that many of our clients are integrating directly into the tool sets that they're using on a day-to-day basis. We work globally and with enterprise-sized customers as well as the small to medium-sized business. So the scope is pretty vast, but where we find a really interesting sweet spot is with large national brands that either have a centralized call center that's taking volumes of calls or distributed networks like franchises or wholly owned operations that are local in their inherent nature. What we really drive for is helping you provide the insight and attribution capabilities you need to make smart media decisions for optimization purchases while also giving you the in-call intent and understanding of the consumer experience so that you can optimize that business performance at a very local level.
Thank you, Matt. And that online to offline opportunity is really a hot topic these days, but something that you guys have been grinding on for years. So we look forward to hearing more about that in just a bit. So let's get right into this. So here's our agenda. We're going to go through all these topics between myself and the Marchex team. And the best place to start is to really talk about the factors and the trends that are driving the local search opportunity for national brands. So the underlying driver here for a lot of these things we're going to be going over today is that mobile usage is growing, and I think we're all cognizant of that fact, and it's really driving call volume. So currently, smartphone penetration in the U.S. is about 79% and quickly growing. And the majority of searches are happening on mobile devices, according to Google. Now, importantly, about half of those searches have local intent to find something to do or to buy or to see or to eat in one's immediate vicinity. And this is a key foundational point that underlies a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing today. So if we go to the next slide, drilling down further, I put together a mobile ad revenue forecast twice per year, which has turned out to be pretty accurate in the last 6 years or so that I've been doing it, and we're pretty proud of that track record. Now, these are the figures we just released a few weeks ago, and they project mobile ad revenues in the U.S. to go from $22.7 billion in 2015 to almost $62.2 billion by 2020. Now, importantly, the share of that total that's attributed to location-targeted mobile ads is 37%, growing to 43% by 2020, and that has a lot to do with the figures we saw on the previous slide, that mobile usage skews towards local intent, and then lots of other factors, that we measure. So to unpack that a bit further, if we go to the next slide, to go one level deeper, one of the ways we subdivide that ad spend is by format. And the clear takeaway here is that search is the leading form of mobile advertising and will continue to grow throughout our forecast period. And there are lots of reasons for that, including higher premiums and ad rates when compared with things like traditional display, and also higher performance due to search's intent-driven use case. But what all this really leads up to is the implication for our main topic today of mobile search as a driver of local commerce, because the prevalence of mobile search is important in that it correlates highly to local actions and conversions. So if we go to the next slide, to back that up, here's some data from Google that show that 3 out of 4 mobile searches trigger additional actions and conversions. And those are actions that are things like visiting a store or making a purchase or making a phone call. And these are all very locally oriented actions, but also importantly are highly valued actions from the perspective of advertisers that are looking for tangible return on ad spend. And now taking this a step further, these actions aren't just happening at high volumes, but they're also happening quickly. On this same slide, if we go back to that data slide, you'll see that 55% of purchase-related conversions happen within 1 hour from the initial search. So that tells me that mobile users are indeed lower funnel, high intent consumers. They're literally an hour away from a conversion, and therefore the opportunity to influence them through, different types of messaging to influence their buying decisions is a very high kind of opportunity, and much higher than any other media that we analyze. So if we go to the next slide, what this all kind of spells out is that all signs point to compelling reasons to capture that user intent. The intent is clearly there. So publishers and advertisers who aren't providing optimized content or ads that include actionable cues for users to take action are missing a large opportunity. So if we go to the next slide, what are some of those calls to action? There are lots of them, and they're growing in prevalence as app developers, publishers, and advertisers catch on to these usage realities that mobile consumers are indeed ready to transact. So with that trend, we're seeing a proliferation of action buttons. And one way this has played out is the rise of buy buttons in feed-based social media like Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and Twitter. It seems like everyone has a buy button now. But where this is all going is that because buy buttons only address e-commerce, the much larger opportunity is in driving offline commerce. We've been saying for years that e-commerce only represents about 7% of U.S. retail. The rest is all offline. So based on that, the prediction we've been making is that these action buttons will start to lean more towards driving offline action. So we're already seeing that with Facebook's call button, which you can see kind of animated to the right there. And if you think about it, this stems from what we've already seen for years in things like Google's local extensions that plant these types of calls to action within search results, and we're going to hear more about that from Matt and Adarsh. So we're seeing more and more with functions like message buttons or schedule an appointment or book a reservation, or what Starbucks did to just launch a function where you can order and pay for your coffee before you get there and skip the line, just grab it and go. So there are lots of ways this trend is playing out. But what I'd like to zero in on is one of the highest value functions on that emerging list of calls to action, which is click to call or call analytics, and what we're calling as an overall field call commerce. So as you see here on this slide, this comes down to a few basic realities that are causing growth in call volume. And that's correlated to the overall growth in smartphones and mobile engagement. So for one, there's the simple fact that the smartphone bolts a search and discover device with a phone. So it has a native dialer and voice input, so on a hardware level it makes a lot of sense. But not only that, calls are really resulting from the fact that, you know, they're high value, high intent calls from transaction ready consumers, similar to the data I showed earlier. But this is especially true in high consideration and complex purchases such as autos or financial services and healthcare. And there you have categories where there's a level of complexity where it compels talking to another human. And this is also an important point because the value of leads in these particular categories is so high, so it's really a ripe area for monetization. So if we go to the next slide, to further kind of quantify that claim that call volume is indeed growing alongside the overall growth of mobile engagement, here's some more BI/Kelsey forecast data showing mobile call volume. So the top line finding here is that calls driven to businesses from all mobile content formats will total, or actually now total, about 93 billion, but that's going to grow to about 160 billion by 2019. And this includes both mobile app and mobile web. So again here, search is the clear winner in terms of call volume, and that's a function of its intent-based nature, which tends to drive a lot of calls, and also the intuitive handoff from search to call that's being driven by a lot of tools like call extensions in search results. So you can also see here how other mobile formats are trending as call drivers, and I won't go into all of them now, but one notable finding is that social media is the smallest but fastest growing format from which calls will be generated, and that results from the rise of native social ads and things like call buttons I discussed earlier. And that growth will mostly come at the expense of traditional display, where we're seeing relatively flat growth. So if we go to the next slide, building from that call volume data, we've also projected the dollar value of the mobile search-based click-to-call market in the U.S., which is currently 2.45 billion, but growing to about 5.34 billion by 2020. So it's clearly a sizable opportunity, not just in call volume, but in dollars as it continues to develop. Now, if we go to the next slide, one thought I want to kind of leave you with is that, you know, these calls are happening either way. All of the usage trends, the mobile realities are going to send this massive quantity of calls to offline businesses. So it's really only a question of capturing that opportunity. And it's a question of what marketers and publishers and app developers and everyone in this ecosystem can do to get ready for that torrent of calls and treat it as an opportunity to get better data, better sense of ROI, and to make better decisions on an ongoing basis. Now, it's really all about, you know, driving those calls, one, but also channeling them to the right places, tracking them, analyzing the calls, and then iterating and optimizing marketing campaigns accordingly and on an ongoing basis. So luckily we have Marchex here to discuss really how that's done and to discuss kind of tactics as practitioners of this field. So to do that, at this point, I will kick it over to you, Matt.
Hey, great, Mike. Thank you. I can't tell you all how excited I am to be here and how cool I find this topic to be. Mike did a great job of teeing up for us the opportunity that's emerging before us as marketers. And I'm excited to dig in. We're really going to cover off two things in this next couple of sections of the webinar. I'm going to focus in on the experience of the customer and what we can do as a business to optimize the phone calls that are happening. And then I'll hand it off to Adarsh, and Adarsh is going to spend some time sharing with us the technology and tools that are being used by national brands with call volumes to optimize their media and drive stair-step improvements in their overall campaign performance. First, a little background. My name is Matt Mullenberg. I have worked in the auto industry for much of the last 18 years. I'm relatively new to Marchex, but very close to the call space because of the work that I've done in local search marketing and hyperlocal targeting of all media channels. If we move on to the next slide, what we're really highlighting is this behavior change that's happening with consumers. With so many folks walking around with this mobile device in their pocket, the idea that I might want to fill out a form or communicate with a business through a chat session is dwindling. In fact, those are sort of old school contact methods. By so prominently featuring a call to action of click to call on a device that's actually a phone, we're seeing a reversal of a trend that we used to see. We're seeing growing numbers of phone calls that are coming into businesses. And Mike's done a great job of showing you the data and the trends and where it's headed over the next 5 years. If we go on to the next slide, what's important is understand what that means for your business. These aren't casual callers. These aren't people that are just picking up the phone to say, hey, how you're doing. Most of the people that react to one of these ad units is calling because they have a question or they're interested in a specific product or service that your business has to offer. Yeah, in fact, there are some percentage of these calls that are non-product calls. Those do happen, and we'll talk a minute about that. And surprisingly, a lot of these phone calls just simply go unanswered. Across all of the verticals we work, we see that roughly 16% of all phone calls aren't even picked up by the local business. That's an immediate point of optimization. On the next slide, you'll see where that 13% breaks out. The calls that aren't product or service related, everybody gets a personal call at work. There's the occasional wrong number. People call for job inquiries, and how many of us are burdened with or bombarded by calls from vendors that want us to purchase something from them. Those calls, of course, matter, but the great and vast majority of the calls that are coming in are product or service related. It's a lot of fun to look at this data. We're going to go sort of vertical by vertical and talk a little bit about the business optimization or the call optimization opportunity that exists, starting with hotels and auto rental. If you think about hotels, the industry has spent a lot of time trying to drive that consumer online to make and complete their reservation. In fact, if you work in that industry, you probably had a goal or a mantra within your company to reduce the number of calls that were happening. Well, guess what? In a mobile world, that trend has reversed, and in fact, it's in your interest to dial into those consumers and really understand the intent of those calls. What we've found and what we learn is that some of our partners in the hospitality industry are using the in-call data, the things that can be learned from the words that are spoken while that customer is talking to your agent, to make optimization decisions. Optimization decisions around the website, for example. Hospitality websites often feature photos of the lobby and the pool. But what we see from in-call content is the customer wants to understand the view from the particular room that they might have, or needs an understanding of the amenities that are in the immediate area around them. Savvy advertisers are taking that feedback and enhancing that web experience to better answer those questions for the consumers when they are on the website. But they're also thinking about the phone call itself and trying to figure out how do we help our agents at those local properties book more of those calls into reservations. Similarly, for the rental car companies, yeah, it's easy to go online and book a car at an airport if you're just driving around a particular city, but there's a class and niche of customer that you should be dialing into, and those are customers that are traveling with large groups and are looking for minivans or multi-passenger vehicles to support the size of group that they're traveling with, or they're customers that have been in a collision and are looking for a substitute vehicle that fits within the confines of their insurance parameters. Things that can't easily be done through a website. We need to be thinking about, well, what do those customers mean to our business, and how do we optimize that phone experience so that we're routing customers to an agent that's skilled and trained to handle the type of inquiry that they might have. If we move forward a slide, the automotive industry is a particularly interesting industry to look at. Call volumes are high. Sure, people show up at the lot just to browse, but increasingly what we're seeing is customers are out on the road thinking about buying a car, and they get into a shopping process that involves their mobile phone, and they might be looking at your inventory before they get to the dealership. They might be engaging with the specials or the promotions that are on your site. But a lot of times what's happening is they're looking and they're hitting that click to call button and they're connecting with your business to help them make the decision to drive that extra mile to get over to your store. In fact, we see that 60% of phone calls that come into car dealers are new prospects of some type. They either want to talk to the sales department, the service department, or the parts department. 40% of those, of course, are follow-ups, customers who have a vehicle in the service bay and they're trying to understand where they're at in that process. Both of those things create opportunities for optimization. On the sales side, we have enterprise customers that are recording all of the phone calls that are happening to their local franchises, their local dealers. And then they're taking that audio and they're processing it through signal processors to better understand the conversations that are happening. From a sentiment perspective, they're looking at the agent, the person in the dealership that was speaking. Was it a positive tone or was it a negative tone? They're looking at the consumer sentiment. How are they reacting to the way that that agent is speaking to me? And in fact, they're often listening to calls and scoring those calls for whether or not the salesperson followed the steps of the sale to qualify the customer, identify the product they're interested in, and try to set that appointment to get them into the dealership. All of those moments are optimization moments for the customer experience. If we really think about it as a zero moment of truth, we spend a ton of time and energy online trying to improve our web properties, to take down the barriers, to help our customers get to the things that they're looking for most. But we're ignoring the phone call. We don't think about it, probably because we've been taking phone calls for 100 years and they're just a part of our business. But the truth is, at that moment of truth, at that time when that customer picks up the phone and calls that local franchise, a tone is being set for that business. And whether or not the dealer does a good job of handling that call may determine whether or not that customer is even going to buy that brand or if they're going to go look for a different product or a different dealership to do business with. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see similar trends in other industries. Multifamily housing, people who are looking for an apartment to live in. A lot of those inquiries begin as phone calls, and it might be interesting to know that a full 1/4 of those phone calls involve a discussion of a lease or the rental contract. The question should become, how do I optimize my campaigns to drive those people that are actually looking for a lease or a contract into an agent or a call queue that's specially trained to handle the questions that might come about the lease or to move that customer towards a signing or an appointment to see the property. In automotive, again, right, 70% of product and service calls to an auto dealer mention a specific make or model. How are we handling that in the sales process? Is the sales agent trained on the call to qualify that customer, to understand their ability to finance, to understand what their payment or trade-in might be, so that as they move through the sales process, they're doing a better job of helping that customer answer the critical questions that take some of the fear or some of the frustration out of the transaction and empower them to want to come into the dealership and have a deeper and more meaningful conversation. And then home services is another interesting place to look. Results here vary dramatically by the type of service. Plumbers, for example, what a great industry to be in. 50% of first-time phone calls to a plumber result in a request for an appointment. They want the plumber to come out to their house. Well, that's probably a no-brainer if you think about it, right? I know that if my toilet breaks or my sink backs up or the shower's not working, I don't really care which plumber it's going to be. I'm going to find the first plumber that can come and come out and fix that. Other home services, it might be a longer sale. If I'm looking for somebody to do a remodel or a construction, what does that phone experience need to look like? How do I handle that customer to build confidence with them in the phone conversation so that they trust me enough to come out, look at the property, discuss the job, and actually provide an estimate on it? If we go to the next slide, these optimization opportunities really will define your brand or destroy your brand. Your customers are getting a great experience online. They're aware of your brand. They're interested enough that they're willing to pick up the phone or to hit that click to call button to have a conversation with you. And so often that call fails in one way or another. Oftentimes one of the most shocking ways is simply not answering that call. And one of the things that we work with our businesses on is to focus on time of day. When are those volumes of calls coming in, and am I actually sufficiently staffed to handle it? In the automotive industry, in the automotive service repair industry, we see this really interesting trend where there's a massive spike in phone calls that happens at the noon hour. Well, if we think about that, that's natural, right? I'm at work, I'm not doing personal things during the day, but boy, I get on my break and I know I need to get my car in. I pick up the phone and I call the dealership. Well, guess what happens in the dealership at noon? The receptionist goes to lunch, the backup receptionist is busy doing other things. The phone simply goes unanswered at really, really high rates during that particular hour. So how do you use this data to understand those trends and staff accordingly and appropriately so that you can answer many, many more of those phone calls that enter the business? Many of our enterprise marketers who have these national brands with distributed resellers or distributed marketers that are local in nature are focused on that optimization experience. They're using their training departments at national scale to roll out programs that support and help those franchisees or those retailers to do a better job with this piece of the customer experience. As this volume of phone calls continues to grow, we think there's more and more opportunity for businesses of all sorts to get involved with this customer experience as it's happening on the phone. If we go to the next slide, one of the other things that we find is very interesting is businesses with these high consideration, high touch products are often leery or unwilling to provide price data on the phone. And in fact, what we know is that the customer who's picking up the phone and making that call is likely to ask that question. And building trust is about providing the information that the customer's looking for. So as you think about your own business operations and the phone calls that are coming in, what are you doing to optimize that experience? Are you providing the staff that's necessary to answer the phone? And have you trained that staff to address the common questions that are seen in phone call after phone call after phone call? If you haven't, you're probably providing a poor customer experience, you're likely undermining the value of your brand, and you're most certainly losing sales and losing opportunities to others. If we go to the next slide, here's some high things you should be thinking about from a business optimization or a consumer experience optimization perspective. Are you answering the phone? When that customer comes, are you staffed appropriately to pick up the phone and say hello? In automotive, 1 out of 4 times that doesn't happen. Imagine if you locked the front door of your dealership so that 1 out of 4 customers couldn't walk into the physical facilities. What does that mean in your own industry, financial services, multifamily? Are you preventing your customer from actually making contact? And then how do you improve that service when they are answering the phone? What are the training opportunities that exist? What are the levers that you have within your organization to build and deliver training programs or best practices or curricula down at that local level that helps those retailers become better at what they're doing and ultimately drives better sales and better results and volume for you? Or are you spending time thinking about those calls where the customer didn't buy? And what do you do with those calls? Do you use them as an opportunity to help your salesperson get better? Some industries are actually listening to those calls, identifying when the salesperson did a poor job of handling the call, and within an hour are picking up the phone and calling that customer back to try to provide a better experience and see if they can recover that lost sale opportunity. And then as we're about to hear from Adarsh, there's a number of ways to also optimize the media experience and the media budgets so that you're getting the best value and driving more and more of these phone calls. Because once you've optimized the business processes and you've trained your staff to actually handle the customer on the phone, driving more of them and optimizing your media to drive the outcome that provides a real-world success is key to that. So understanding which keywords drive phone calls is really important, or which pages within your website are driving phone calls, or which campaigns are connecting in a way that a consumer hits that click to call button. So we'll move to the next slide. When it's really interesting to look at is how adding these offline measurements of phone calls and other elements into your media optimization strategy can change the results and drive your optimization decisions. No longer do you need to rely on a weighted site outcome that's a proxy that you think suggests that a transaction happened or that a call happened or that something happened during that call. The technology is now at a place where you can actually take the insights from the words that are spoken in that call and use it to drive better optimization of your campaigns and make smarter decisions about where you're putting your money. Next slide. So Adarsh, I'm going to hand it over to you here.
Thank you, Matt. So Mike and Matt talk quite a bit about the fact that calls are happening. And we see that when we look at our data, our customers, we see 50 to 60% spike in calls year over year. And most of that is being influenced by some of the trends that we talked about today. I'm going to focus more on the part that Mike alluded to. While the calls are happening, it is critical that you're able to capture that information, analyze it, and bring it back into a closed loop, without which it's hard to justify some of the spend against mobile that's happening today. And our customers are facing this problem today. They know customers are calling. They know some of the ad formats that Google, Facebook are bringing to market are working. They just can't seem to attribute the sale back to these ad formats, which is causing grief in terms of justifying mobile budgets. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next 15, 20 minutes. So what you're seeing here is data that shows that budgets are shifting to mobile. We can definitely validate this. If you look at our data, our customers are spending more on search and display on mobile to drive sales. And it's kind of interesting. We say search and display are on track to become the dominant customer acquisition channel. And you could be asking the question, why display? Why are we bringing in display as a customer acquisition channel when predominantly search is where mindshare is? So what we're seeing is, there's a lot of cross-channel effects. Search is absolutely where you acquire the customer, you capture the customer. We're also seeing a lot of great data that shows that when you put search and display together, that's even better. So that's why we believe both display and search, there's a lot of budget against those channels, and they are working to drive a sale. Today we're going to focus more on search. So if you go to the next page, what we have here is all the different innovations that's happening just with one publisher in the search space, which is Google. And you can imagine if you go to Bing, Yahoo, there's a bunch of innovation happening there too. What I want to bring your attention to is if you look at the far left of the page, what you see is an enhanced campaign. And this is, for the search marketers on this call, you all know what I'm referring to. The idea of an enhanced campaign began with, Google kind of doing a lot of the legwork for you in terms of determining when an ad should be shown, whether it should be shown on mobile, whether it should be shown on desktop. And if you look at the ad on the far left, that is a straightforward desktop ad where you've got a link that the customer or the consumer can click on that takes you to a landing page. Now on that landing page, you could imagine that customers are doing e-commerce, which is they're browsing the web pages and transacting online, or they could get some information there, walk into a store and buy something. The third purchase path, which is what we're here to talk about, is there could be a phone number on that landing page, and the consumer could choose to pick up the phone and call. So that is enhanced campaigns at a very basic level. What you're seeing after that, towards your right, is since the last couple of years, we're seeing a tremendous amount of innovation in terms of making the call to action very relevant for mobile. So in this case, you're seeing 3 different ad formats: enhanced campaigns with call extensions, call-only campaigns, enhanced campaigns with location extensions, where for all of those campaign types, you're actually seeing a call button in the ad. So what that allows the consumer to do is if they are searching for something they need now, instead of trying to fill a form or going and trying to navigate a web page, you just hit the call button and the call goes through. That's phenomenal. We all love that. It's making the consumer experience better. If you look at call-only campaigns, due to customer feedback, Google's created a format where it is mobile only. So the only thing the ad does when you click on it is it generates a call. There is no other action possible with that ad format. So this is all great, good for the customer, good for the consumers. What you're seeing on the far end is the idea that it's not going to stop. The innovation is going to continue. That is a price comparator, if you will. They're actually looking at a generic keyword, and based on the generic keyword, a certain set of offers, which are local, are being shown there. And of course, as you can see, there's a choice there. Consumers can pick up the phone and call, or they could go to your website. So the innovation is not going to stop. Here is where the challenge is. While all these formats are proliferating and calls are happening, it is extremely hard to measure the call and tie it back to the keyword that led to that call. So tying it back to the ad is a very hard problem. And we're going to speak about that problem, and I'm going to share some of the tools that's available today that addresses this problem. So if you go to the next page, what you see there is some data that we've collected over time. If a customer is focused on mobile, and that is a big if, like you have to allocate budget, you have to make some of these decisions, but if you are focused on mobile, then what we see is that the two paths that I talked about earlier, calls coming from landing pages, calls coming from these new search ad formats, the typical split is that 60% of these calls are coming from the new ad formats, and 40% comes from landing page. Now, this is an average number. We have customers where 90% of their calls are coming from the new ad formats. We also have customers where 70 to 80% of their calls are coming from landing pages. And we expect the shift to continue to happen as awareness around mobile grows and as big brands, national customers shift budgets to mobile to tap into that local opportunity. So there is this shift that's going on where we feel a lot more calls, where we know a lot more calls are coming from these new mobile ad formats. But now the question is, how do you really measure? Because you got to measure, you got to tie that back into a closed loop for you to be sure. So if you move to the next page, the key problem that we are trying to address here is the lack of visibility into what search keyword is driving to a call, and not just a call, to the actual sale that happened on the call. So if we move on to the next page, what we show there is it's a very obvious problem for us, but we want to make sure that we are grounding everybody else on the call around this problem, which is when you look at online, a search marketer has a lot of great tools. They use very popular bid optimization tools like Kensho, Marin, DoubleClick, Ignition One, and they have a lot of providers of data who hook up their data into those bid optimization tools. And what then happens is you've got a closed loop for online. The challenge with offline, and I'm including calls, conversion from calls, and conversion for store, is it is extremely hard to close the loop when it comes to these offline outcomes such as calls and store. And we're going to talk a little bit about how the team at Marchex, we've been thinking through the problem, collaborating with some of the industry leaders, Google, if you will, and trying to close the loop for the offline part of the equation. So if we move to the next page, the key solution is to get 100% keyword attribution for calls and bring that data back into the bid optimization platforms. Now, I call out the bid optimization platforms because the platforms come with a tremendous amount of horsepower around algorithms used to optimize search. So if we can hook up the data into these bid optimization tools, then it really powers the bid optimization tools to do a lot of the legwork for the search marketers. You could also imagine some of our customers have their own proprietary bid optimization tools. Then the question is, how do you take all this great offline data and bring it into those tools? But at the end of the day, the data needs to sit in a dashboard where you are seeing the online conversions, and right alongside it, you are seeing the offline conversions, so you could actually go and optimize the two. And here is a visualization that shows all of the great click data, which is the part in gray, and then the additional offline data, in this case calls, is lined up right next to it. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail into what types of data that we are able to measure and bring back in so you can optimize. So moving to the next page, what you see here is three very different categories of data that we've been able to surface into bid optimization tools. There's a lot of challenges around being able to do that, including the workflow itself. Like one very interesting nugget I want to throw out there is when you think about calls coming from new Google ad formats, most of the analytics connected to search kind of revolves around this idea of a click ID. As long as you join the data, whether it's offline or online, to the click ID, you're able to surface that where you need, you're able to optimize it. The challenge with the calls coming from new Google ad formats is there is no universal click ID that you can connect it back to. So it's a really hard problem to solve. And the good news is there are modern tools available today that helps you measure conversions from click to call and bring it back into the bid optimization tools. So today you're looking at a world where both online and offline are measurable and you can actually close the loop. So let me talk about the three specific data sets that is highly interesting for our customers, the big brands that we work with. First is what we refer to as deep call insights. The idea here is to use, when applicable, deep machine learning to analyze the calls and surface at an aggregate level for a keyword, how many conversations did the keyword drive? How many hang-ups resulted from the keyword? How many times when a keyword drove a call was there a hold time abandoned? Matt referred to the idea that you need to really have a great experience to actually drive a conversion. So it is valuable data for the search marketers to understand that search did drive a great call. There was actually a call, there was actually a conversation, but something happened that did not let it convert. So having the data around why did a call not convert powers search marketers to understand what is the true value of the keyword. Is the keyword not converting to a sale because there is a business operation problem? Or is it genuinely that this keyword is driving a ton of customer service calls and there is no intent in terms of the customer to buy around that keyword? So these are some very interesting nuggets that the deep call insights can surface for the search marketer to use to optimize their campaign. Another classification of data is the actual call path data itself. For example, IVR data. Many of our top customers ask us this question. We know in the search path to a call, there is an IVR, and the IVR says click 1 if you're a new customer, or click 2 if it is an existing customer. That is extremely valuable data. So to capture that click on the IVR, whether it's a 1 or a 2, and tie it back into the actual keyword that led to that call, powers the search marketers to think through which keywords are actually driving new customers versus not. Again, very valuable data for our search marketers to use to optimization. The final bucket of data is around conversion data itself. There is the idea that many of our big customers actually have conversion data that's coming from a call available inside a CRM or inside a database connected to their call center. Being able to take that actual sale, tie it back to the call and then to the keyword puts search marketers in a very powerful position. They can actually tell you if a keyword is driving X thousand dollars of revenue and if another keyword is driving 3 times that amount in terms of actual sales, which is actually the true closing the loop, because you actually know the conversion, you also know the sales that came out of the conversion, and now you're able to close the loop. So those are 3 buckets of data that we are able to surface today with the modern tools we have into the bid optimization tool. Let me share with you now how the data is used by our customers and what are the benefits that they're seeing. Well, the very basic benefit, and I refer to this slide as this is the stuff that's already happening, but once you get visibility, it changes how you make decisions. So what is the slide about? Well, what exactly happens when you bring in offline data and online data together? What you see here is real customer data, anonymized of course. If you just look at the top line where we refer to keyword 1, before you have a tool that can actually capture offline data, the idea that the search marketer had was 17 conversions came from that particular keyword. The cost for driving that conversion, if you look at the far right on the gray box, $75 to drive a conversion, or cost per action, if you will, for that particular keyword. If you go down the list of keyword and look at keyword 3, that looks like a very promising keyword, 55 conversions and $33 to drive a conversion. Naturally, you would want to bet against keyword 3 versus keyword 1. I mean, that data just makes sense. The challenge here is it's partial data. The minute you bring in offline conversions, what you see change is the aggregate conversions keyword 1 is now driving is 105 versus keyword 3, which even though it is at 134, the cost per conversion for keyword 1 is now at $12, and the cost per conversion for keyword 3 is much more than that. So this is where you now have interesting data to basically decide which keywords do you want to bet against. Keyword 3 is still high performing, it's great, but keyword 1, which is looking like a bad keyword, now could be a keyword that you allocate budget against. So that is what you get on day 1, which is this has been happening, but the visibility has been exposed around what is the true ROI that's coming from the keywords you're betting against. allowing you to make some very critical decisions on day one once you have the visibility. If you move to the next page, I do want to address some of the additional advanced insights you can generate once you have the data. Matt referred to time of day being very important for local. Imagine if you could see all the conversions, web, call, coming together on a time of day analysis. It leads to very interesting situations. I want to share a story with you. In this particular slide, what you see is, if you look at the 8 a.m. day part, you can see that the cost per conversion is really low, and it's driving a significant amount of calls. The question is, do you want to move more budget to the morning and drive additional calls at that lower CPA? But there's a very interesting story that one of our customers shared with us once we provided the data, and this is around the idea that your call center is also a fixed resource. There's a certain capacity your call center has. Imagine a scenario where at the noon hour or at a particular day part, your call center has hit maximum capacity because of the calls that's getting driven into it. Imagine if you're working without that data and you tend, or the search marketer tends to actually up the budget during that same hour to drive more calls. What ends up happening is there may be valuable calls in there, but it's going into the call center, which is already at capacity. So therefore, you're seeing a ton of hold time abandons, or you're seeing failed calls. Having that connected data between what search is doing to drive calls and how the call centers are actually able to handle it, then allows you to do true ROI optimization for your business. Very valuable data, and we see some tremendous results when our customers are able to leverage it. Going to the next page, another view, very, very critical for local, is the geography-based analysis around what's driving a conversion. Very obvious. What you see on this page is the bubble represents the volume of calls and conversion, and then the color kind of represents the actual cost per conversion. So you can quickly move, depending on your strategy, you can move budget to markets where there's more opportunity to drive a conversion at a lower sale, and that's what this particular chart shows. I want to leave you with one final thought, and going to the next page here. The Marchex's stand on search optimization is you need a 360-degree view of the online and offline world to be able to bring about true ROI optimization, and we believe it is a new norm for media optimization. What you see here is a customer who was able to bring together both call conversions and web conversions and optimize it as a whole, and this is the incremental benefit that you get when you use that data on a day-to-day basis. Here what you see is the total aggregate conversions increased by 16%. The call portion of it was actually a 72% lift because of the visibility, but the overall was a 16% lift. And at the same time, they were able to do this with a 6% drop in CPA. So I want to kind of leave you with that idea that think about bringing a full 360 view of conversions you're driving, attribute them back to the keyword, which allows you then to do some pretty phenomenal things around ROI optimization. So with that, I would love to transfer this back over to Mike.
Yes, thanks, Adarsh. Very interesting stuff. Thank you also, Matt, for your earlier comments and presentation. So we're now going to move into an open discussion and take some audience questions. I will remind the audience, if you have questions, please add them to the GoToWebinar questions widget you see there on the right side of your screen. But I'll start with a question, which is one of attribution. And this is a hot topic these days, but often the credit for any given call or click goes to kind of the last place it happens. Darsh, you showed some great data about the breakdown of calls being launched from call extensions and landing pages. I showed some data around the trending growth of calls being launched from different places like display ads and all of that. But often in those analyses, we're talking about where the call is launched, but what about where influence is happening further upstream? Perhaps a display ad that someone saw 2 weeks ago that may have had a branding impact. So it's really a question of moving from that, last click attribution to full cycle, full funnel attribution. So in a search world where it's usually about last click attribution, what are your guys' thoughts on cross-channel attribution? I know there's a lot of challenges there, but what are you seeing there and what are you doing?
So I can take that, and Matt would love your thoughts after that for sure. And that's a great question, Mike. So where we are at, especially, I'm going to kind of index on the offline aspect a little bit because I feel for online, there's been a lot of great traction around getting to a cross-channel view, if you will. For offline, what we're seeing is, first we got to kind of close the attribution gap per channel. I mean, trying to get to a cross-channel view when we don't have visibility into a particular channel in itself is a hard problem. So we're big proponents of get visibility into what's driving a sale when you're talking about search, get visibility into the influence of display, if you will, on a call or a conversion. Once you have that, and you know, we're not here to talk about display, but I do want to mention that some of our customers are leveraging our display and search products together. And what happens is pretty interesting, where their overall conversion goes up when they leverage more data, especially around display and search, influencing a conversion. So my thought on that is we are going to go into an increasingly cross-channel attribution world, if you will, deep attribution into each channel, then tying that data up into a clean consumer journey that finally ends in a sale. That's the data set that's going to be powerful for a digital marketer in future to be able to drive a conversion. If you look at display specifically, it is a well-known fact that display as a click-through media does not drive many calls. So many of our customers think display does not perform. But the minute you give a view-through basis, put search at the end of that, and then show how a customer saw 3 or 4 display impressions, which led to a search, which led to a sale, that data is powerful because now you know that search is critical. You need to continue to invest, but the additional investments in the cross-channel aspect of it will definitely drive the conversion in a much more sophisticated basis.
Great. Anything to add, Matt?
You know, I think it's amazing what's happening in the industry right now. The addition of this offline behavior or these offline outcomes back to those online attribution models that we've been using for so many years are really going to introduce a stair-step in performance improvement that we haven't really seen in probably a decade or so. So omni-channel or multi-channel optimization that is driven by the inputs of a transaction actually happened is a lot more interesting than multi-channel optimization that's driven off of a proxy like a weighted site outcome.
Yeah, that's interesting. And sticking on this kind of topic of attribution, I want to get a little bit more color from you guys on kind of what you're doing there, because I think that that's traditionally, of course, been a pain point in attributing online activity to offline activity, or online influence to offline activity. And you know, there's been extrapolation methodologies that people have done in measuring that influence. You guys, and with respect to calls, have a very interesting and I think differentiated position, because the amount of data you're collecting and all of the calls you're measuring, as a byproduct of that, you have an interesting way to identify with a large degree of confidence you know, where that online activity leads to an offline phone call. You know, without getting too technical, at a high level, can you give us some color on kind of how you're doing that?
Yeah, we see this really interesting space because of the way our technology works, that we can make connectivity between a phone call and a session that others don't have the ability to do. And when you sit in that world where you've got that connective tissue, it doesn't actually have to end at the phone call. It's fantastic that we can take that call and that we can analyze the insights within that call and map it back to that online behavior. But we can also use that same technology to take retail level transaction data and map that data back to the online activity as well. So because of the core technology of call tracking and the way our numbers are utilized by our customers, it opens up this unique opportunity for our partners to have a level of insight and connectivity that nobody else in the industry really has. Adarsh, you probably have something to add to that.
Yeah, and that's right, Matt. I just would add one point on top of that, which is when you look at how our technology makes this happen, and Mike, your specific question was around how do you actually do the attribution. We think of it in 2 parts. One is the key thing that Matt called out, which is a lot of what we do is very deterministic. We're sitting we are deeply connected into Google and Bing. We are also the provider for call analytics. So you could imagine we just see that call come through from the search ad. So there's a lot of deterministic attribution we do anyways. But where we have significantly enhanced our capability, especially in the last year, is when you do not have that deterministic attribution, just because of the nature of offline, we also have a very proprietary data set that actually connects the online and offline IDs together in an anonymous and aggregate fashion. And I know we don't want to get too technical, but think of it as where deterministic fails, we have a backup in a probabilistic model that can actually connect the consumer online to offline. And we're able to leverage both these data sets together to get to a very high degree of attribution, both for search, display, and other channels. So that's kind of where I would leave it, and happy to go deeper if you need me to.
That's great, and I think that's very powerful in today's kind of rising affinity for clearer and more tangible ROI through these clearer paths of attribution from online to offline. So I think that's well answered. So we're going to have to conclude the discussion there. We have a number of more questions here. I apologize to all who we didn't get to answer their questions on the air, but we will follow up offline to answer those. And also, if everyone could stick with us for a few minutes, we have a few kind of giveaways and also housekeeping information on how to get the recording of this webcast or the slides. So first off, thanks for your time in joining us today. Here is some information on downloading a free report from Marchex. It's called the $4 Billion Blind Spot, and it dives deep into really why keyword attribution is essential for click-to-call advertising and how advertisers who are successfully using that keyword attribution for call extensions have really seen a tangible cost per acquisition decline by, in some cases, as much as 50%. So some really good actionable stuff there. You can jot down this URL. I realize it's kind of long, but we're also going to be sending each attendee of this webinar the link to download this report for free, along with the other links that Patrick's going to discuss in a second. So if you want it sooner, go ahead and go to this site, but otherwise I will be sending you that link. And finally, we'd like to offer you all a discount code for our next conference, which is coming up in just 3 weeks. This code will get you $200 off the current registration price, and this will be an exciting conference to attend. We're really gearing up for this, and as the name implies, we're going to be talking about what's coming next in media and advertising, and we're very excited. We have speakers from Google and Facebook and LA Times and ESPN, and we actually just yesterday confirmed Robert Scoble as our Day 2 keynoter. So it will really be a worthwhile experience, and we'd love to see you there. I'd love to meet you. If you're able to make it, please reach out to me, and my contact info is actually on this next slide. So why don't we go there, and in closing, I'd like to thank Matt and Adarsh and everyone for listening, and at this point I'll pass it back to Patrick to take us home with the final details. So that's it. Patrick, over to you, sir.